I must say that I am proud to show this video about the armed forces of the Philippines. Make no mistake about it, though, the United States of America has the best fighting force and military operations on this planet. With that being said, I'm going to explain to you about the Armed Forces of the Philippines. The Armed Forces of the Philippines is a military organization responsible for ensuring the security and defense of the Philippines. It is a unified organization composed of three major branches, each with specific roles and responsibility. As of my knowledge of January of 2023, there are three branches of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and they are the Philippine Army. The Philippine Army is responsible for ground warfare and defense. Its primary mission is to safeguard the country's territorial integrity and protect the Filipino people from internal and external threats. The Army employs various infantry, artillery, and armored units. They also play a crucial role in disaster response and community development projects. The second branch, the Philippine Navy. The Philippine Navy is tasked with maritime defense and security. Its mission includes protecting Philippine waters, securing maritime trade routes, and conducting search and rescue operations. The Navy has a fleet of vessels, including patrol boats, frigates, and assault vehicles. It plays a vital role in safeguarding the country's extensive coastline. A side note to that, remember they have 7,600 islands to protect. Excuse me. Last is the Philippine Air Force. The Philippine Air Force is responsible for air defense and aerial operations. Its mission includes protecting Philippine airspace, providing air support to ground forces, and conducting reconnaissance. The Air Force operates various aircrafts, including fighter jets, transport planes, and helicopters. They also play a key role in disaster response and humanitarian assistance. The AFP, which is the Armed Forces of the Philippines, is under civil control with the President of the Philippines serving as the Commander-in-Chief. The AFP plays a multifaceted role including national defense, disaster response, and community development projects. The military is actively involved in addressing internal security challenges, including counterterrorism efforts and insurgency operations. Humanitarian assistance and disasters response, or as they call it, the HADR, is a significant aspect of the AFP's activities, providing assistance during natural disasters. The Philippines has been working in modernizing its armed forces to enhance its defense capabilities. So they're upgrading their equipment, their people, and their training. Please watch this video at the tail end. When my closing remarks, I'm going to give you some facts about who actually started this military force of the Philippines. I think you're going to be quite surprised. And then I'm going to turn you on to a movie that you might think about watching about these brave men and women of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Talk to you in a little bit.
The Philippine Army was established on December 21, 1935, as the Army of the Philippines, with a general headquarters in Manila, and units and formations based throughout the provinces of the Philippines. The Philippine Army was initially organized under the National Defense Act of 1935, Commonwealth Act No. 1, that formally created the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Certain components of the Armed Forces of the Philippines were under the control of the United States Army Forces in the Far East, USAFFE, from 1941 to 1946. Before the establishment of the Commonwealth government in 1935, no effort was made for self-defense by Philippine forces since the United States assumed responsibility for the defense of the islands. An immediate concern of the Commonwealth government was the defense of an emerging nation. President-elect Manuel L. Quezon convinced his friend, General Douglas MacArthur, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, to organize a national army with Franklin D. Roosevelt's agreement in the summer of 1935. MacArthur had unusually broad authority to deal with the Secretary of War and the Chief of Staff as military advisor to the Commonwealth government to organize a Philippine National Army. MacArthur had broad authority to deal with the United States Secretary of War, his successor as the Army Chief of Staff, and the United States Army Philippine Department and its commander Major General Lucius R. Holbrook, who had been told that his most important peacetime mission was to assist MacArthur in forming a Philippine force capable of defending the islands. The plan called for a small regular army with divisions of about 7,500 men, conscription of all men between 21 and 50 years of age, and a 10-year training program to build a reserve army, a small air force, and a fleet of torpedo boats capable of repelling an enemy. The National Assembly of the Philippines' first act was the passage of the National Defense Act on December 21, 1935, with initial plans for a 10,000-man regular force based on the incorporation of the Philippine Constabulary, a 400,000-man reserve force by 1946, and a West Point-type military academy in Baguio on Luzon. Quezon noted that there was inadequate funds and time to build an effective naval defense force. The act provided for no navy, but an offshore patrol within the army. The offshore patrol would be based on British-designed fast torpedo boats, with an anticipated 36 boats under contract by 1946. The Philippine Army Air Corps would, by that time, have about 100 bombers and additional tactical aircraft in support of the offshore patrol and coastal defense. The Commonwealth would have 10 military districts, comparable to corps areas in the United States, each able to provide an initial reserve division, growing to 3, with full development of the reserve force. In a 1936 speech, MacArthur described the force's function as making an invasion so costly that no nation would make the attempt, emphasizing the island's terrain as making penetration nearly impossible. Development was slow. 1936 was largely devoted to building camps and facilities, with the first conscripts called up on January 1, 1937. A major problem was the formation of a military officer corps, with constabulary officers trained in law enforcement and limited numbers of Philippine Scouts officers becoming senior officers in the new force. By the end of 1939, the reserve force numbered 104,000 men and 4,800 officers. The Philippine Army Air Corps had about 40 planes and 100 trained pilots by 1940. The offshore patrol's development was more problematic, with only 2 British boats delivered before the war in Europe cut off further deliveries, and a struggle to build boats under license locally produced only 1 boat by October 1941. President Quezon and others recognized that the naval defense was inadequate protection against a first-rate naval power, but the Philippines had neither the money nor industrial base to provide adequate naval force, and relied on the assumption that the United States Navy would not idly stand by if the Philippines were attacked. When the war with Japan began, the Philippine Army was 6 years from its founding in December 1935 and about 5 years from the 1946 date at which it was to be fully operational. The naval force which was to protect it against a first-rate naval power was in ruins at Pearl Harbor. The Japanese had pilots standing by fueled and loaded bombers in Formosa, prepared to strike the Philippines. The Army of the Philippines was initially organized under the National Defense Act of 1935, Commonwealth Act No. 1, of December 21, 1935. The act specified that presidential appointments to grades above 3rd lieutenant should be made from former holders of reserve commissions in the United States Army and former Philippine Scouts and Constabulary officers. After the establishment of the Commonwealth, Manuel L. Quezon, its first president, sought the services of General Douglas MacArthur to evolve a national defense plan. On December 21, 1935, the Army of the Philippines was established. The act set forth the organizational structure of the Army and enlistment and mobilization procedures. The Army's development was slow. In 1936 a general headquarters and camps were built, cadres were organized and instructors, drawn largely from the Philippine Constabulary, were trained. The commander of the Philippine Department provided Philippine Scouts as instructors and detailed U.S. Army officers to assist in the inspection, instruction and administration of the program. By the end of the year, instructors were trained and camps, including general headquarters, established. The first group of 20,000 to 40,000 men was called up on January 1, 1937, and by the end of 1939 there were 4,800 officers and 104,000 men in the reserves. Infantry training was provided at camps throughout the Philippines. Field artillery training was concentrated near the U.S. Army's Fort Stotsenburg, near Angeles in the province of Pampanga, about 50 miles north of Manila, and specialized training was provided at Fort William McKinley, south of Manila. Coast artillery instruction was carried out at Fort Stotsenburg and Grande Island, in Subic Bay, by personnel supplied largely by the American commander at Corregidor. The Philippine Army was drawn from local Christian and Muslim Filipinos, including native Filipinos, Filipino mestizos, Spanish Filipinos, Chinese Filipinos and Moro Filipinos. By the time of the Japanese invasion the 10 reserve divisions were about two-thirds mobilized, for a force of 100,000, poorly equipped and trained troops. The Philippine Scouts numbered about 12,000. The Army was primarily infantry, with some combat engineers and artillery. After the war ended, the Army was reorganized into the Armed Forces of the Philippines. The Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, Filipino, Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas, are the military forces of the Philippines. It consists of three main service branches: the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, including the Marine Corps. The President of the Philippines is the Commander-in-Chief of the AFP and forms military policy with the Department of National Defense. An executive department acting as the principal organ by which military policy is carried out, while the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines serves as the overall commander and the highest-ranking officer in the AFP. Founded under the National Defense Act of 1935, while tracing its roots to the Philippine Revolutionary Army, the AFP has played an integral part in the country's history. The AFP has also been involved in various conflicts, such as combating rebellion against the Communist Party of the Philippines, CPP, and its attached organizations, the New People's Army, NPA, and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, NDF, and operations against local Islamic terrorists in Mindanao. During the Korean War from 1951 to 1953, the Philippines sent various AFP battalions, known as the Philippine Expeditionary Forces, to Korea to fight as part of the U.S.-led United Nations Command in liberating South Korea from the invading North Korean troops. Throughout this time, the AFP had been in conflict with various elements of the Hukbalahap which, still known as the Huks, were reconstituted as the Hukbong Mapigpalaya ng Bayan. This conflict effectively ended in 1954, with the Huks becoming a spent force during the presidency of Ramon Magsaysay. In 1966, an AFP battalion was also sent into South Vietnam during the Vietnam War to ameliorate the economic and social conditions of its people there. AFP units were also sent at the same time to the Spratly Islands. 1963 would see the first women join the ranks of the armed forces with the raising of the Women's Auxiliary Corps. The AFP has also been part of various peacekeeping operations around the world, as part of its contribution to the United Nations. At present, military service is entirely voluntary.
So if you watch the entire video, you kind of know who really started the armed forces of the Philippines. And you're right, it was General Douglas MacArthur played a significant role in the history of the Philippines, particularly during World War II. Here are some key points related to General MacArthur and the armed forces of the Philippines. A little bit about World War II. General MacArthur served as the supreme commander of the Allied forces in the Pacific during World War II. When the Japanese invaded the Philippines in 1941 through 1942, MacArthur led the defense, but he eventually had to leave the Philippines in March of 1942. However, he had made his famous promise, "I shall return," vowing to come back and liberate the Philippines from Japanese occupation. In October of 1944, General MacArthur fulfilled his promise when he landed with Allied forces in Leyte, marking the beginning of the liberation of the Philippines from Japanese control. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was a crucial naval engagement during this campaign. After the liberation, MacArthur played a key role in the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the Philippines. He worked on rebuilding the Philippine government and military, assisting in the establishment of a new armed forces structure. General MacArthur was present during the proclamation of the Philippines' independence on July 4th, 1946, in which is now called Rizal Park in Manila. The Philippines gained independence from American colonial rule. Now remember, we were in control here before the Japanese invaded in World War II, and then we came back, and because of what we told them we would do, we did. So they gained their independence of colonial rule, American rule, and the armed forces of the Philippines, the AFP, was officially established as the country's military. General MacArthur is remembered as a key figure in Philippine history for his leadership during the war, his promise to return, and his role in the post-war reconstruction of this country. The MacArthur Laney Memorial in Leyte commemorates his return to the Philippines. Now, while General MacArthur played a crucial role in the liberation and reconstruction of the Philippines during World War II, the armed forces of the Philippines has evolved independently as the country's military institution responsible for national defense and security. And of course, you well know that we support that 1,000%. So that's the story about the military of the Philippines. So now you want to know how brave these men and women are? Here, well, here's the story. I posted a video. One of the first videos I posted was the Great Raid. It's of a POW camp that was here in the Philippines, and how the Americans, actually the Army Rangers and the Philippine Army, together worked to saving over 600 souls in that POW camp. So here's how the story goes. You got to watch the movie. It's phenomenal. It's called The Great Raid. General MacArthur learns that this POW camp that's in Cabanatuan, and the Japanese, the higher echelon, ordered that the guards kill all of the POWs in that camp. Now, we really didn't know exactly how many POWs were in that camp. So MacArthur learns that what the plan is, the Japanese are going to fly over this POW camp, spray gasoline all over it, and send it ablaze, killing everybody by fire. With the Japanese army circling the camp, anybody trying to escape was going to be shot. After MacArthur learned of this, he said, "No way, that's going to happen on my watch." He instructed and ordered the Army Rangers to put a plan together and try and save these POWs. So the Army Rangers try and save these POWs, and they teamed up with the Philippine Army. The Philippine Army had told the Army Rangers, the guy who was running the whole show on this rescue, that listen, they're waiting for you. They got bridges. They're going to bring in a bunch of people to help support the camp and kill anybody that tries to save these people. So the Philippine Army worked together in bombing these bridges and stopping the escape routes of these Japanese people, Japanese soldiers, from escaping that camp or circling around and coming back after the Army Rangers. So the day is set, the time is ready to go because they learned that they're going to be killing these POWs at any time now. The raid was executed. Now, mind you, there was a lot of sick POWs in that camp. A lot of them couldn't walk and they couldn't even crawl. If it were not for the civilian population in the Philippines and the Philippine Army getting wagons being pulled by ox. That's right, ox. When the raid started, they ended up pulling over 600 souls, 600 POWs. The ones that needed medical attention and could not walk or crawl, they were loaded up on these carts, being carried by ox by civilians, and they were taken to safe location. So what turns out to be, I think there was a couple of U.S. Rangers, Army Rangers that were killed, and a few more of the Philippine Army. But this POW rescue happens to be the largest military rescue of POWs in military history. Unbelievable is all I can tell you. These two forces came together, and if it were not for the Philippine Army and their brave men and women, we couldn't have pulled this off. So if you have any second thoughts whether or not these guys are brave, watch this movie. I hope you enjoy this clip, and please, I don't say it often enough, but please like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and leave me a comment or two. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Until the next video, be safe.